Got it. I'll keep everything in English and write Chapter 1 as continuous prose with no dashes and no headings. Here is Chapter 1. $30,000 hits your account and you are eating during your shift. Who do you think you are? The marble corridors seemed to stop breathing. Fluorescent light hummed above the polished floor. Amara Jones froze with half a turkey sandwich in her gloved hand and the other glove damp from a mop handle. She turned slowly, careful as if a quicker move might splinter the moment into something worse. 10 paces away stood Lawson Reed, founder and chief executive of Reed Dynamics, tall and blade sharp in a black suit. Silver cufflinks caught the light each time his fingers tightened around the phone he was holding up like evidence. His jaw set. His eyes did not blink. "I am sorry, sir," Amara said, the words trembling around a throat that felt too narrow. "I was just what?" Lawson's voice cut clean through the air. "Just taking company time. Just helping yourself to money that is not yours." He lifted the screen a degree higher. $30,000 deposited this morning. The number glowed in cold blue. Amara felt the floor shift under her shoes. Behind Lawson, 2 interns from finance had already slowed to a stop, cups of coffee hovering in their hands. A manager from payroll pretended to check her watch and did not move on. Someone near the elevator said in a whisper that traveled farther than it should, 30 grand for a janitor. "Sir," Amara began, "there has been a misunderstanding. Mr. Shaw, enough." Lawson's gaze never left her. "You people always have a story. You believe kindness is a weakness. You think you can take from me and then cry when you are caught." The words struck with a familiar sting. You people, a phrase heavier than accusation, older than policy. It pressed on a part of Amara that had learned to swallow her pride in break rooms and stairwells. "I did not steal anything," she said softly. "I thought it was a bonus for the extra overnight shifts. My mother is save it. Security will escort you out. You are finished here." The sandwich slid from her glove and touched the floor with a sound so small it hurt. She did not decide to kneel. Her body folded toward the ground before her thoughts could catch it. "Please, Mr. Reed," she said, eyes burning. "I will return the money, all of it. I will work double shifts. My mother needs her medication this week. Please do not do this." A ripple passed through the onlookers, but no one stepped forward. The mop tilted and squealed along the tile until it rested against the cart like a tired limb. Lawson looked at her for one still second. Something unsteady flickered in his face, but pride settled back in its place. "Rules are rules," he said. "You are dismissed." He turned and walked toward the executive wing. The corridor swallowed him. The building exhaled. Amara rose on shaking legs and collected the small facts of her life. A spray bottle that smelled like citrus. A broom with tape wrapped around the handle where the wood splintered. A tote bag with a tear near the seam. She pushed the cart toward the service stairs. The hallway kept its silence wrapped tight around her. Earlier that morning, the world had tasted different. In the supply room with its chalky shelves and buzzing lights, she had balanced her phone between shoulder and cheek and tried not to cry on a good day for once. "Mama," she had whispered, the words spilling out on a laugh. 30,000. "Derek said it is because of the months I took the night floors alone. We can pay the hospital this week. We can pick up 2 months of your medication so you do not have to cut pills. Mama, we can breathe a little." Ruth Jones had sounded tired but warm through the little speaker. "My baby," the sky finally tipped a little change back into your hands. "Eat something. Promise me you will eat." "I am eating now," Amara had said, crinkling the sandwich wrapper with a grin. She had propped the supply room door open because the air felt close. She had not seen the shadow pause in the hall. She had not guessed that a single number could ignite suspicion like a match in a dry field. By evening, the locker room was a hollow drum. One bench, a row of dented doors, the sweet ache of cheap soap. Amara folded her uniform, smoothed the fabric as if order could protect anything, then set it in a grocery bag with her name badge and the dog-eared handbook she had memorized on bus rides. She could still hear the whispers from the corridor long after the voices were gone. 30 grand for mopping. Must be a trick. She pressed her palms to her eyes until the heat blurred and faded. Then she stood and walked out to a sky edged with the gold of a Dallas sunset. At the bus stop, she called home. "Mama." The word cracked. I lost the job. A breath on the line. Then Ruth again, steady even in worry. What happened, baby? They said the money was not mine. I did not know. I swear I did not. Please do not stop the medicine. I will find something fast. Maybe the clinic needs cleaners for overnights. I will make it work. Come home, Ruth said, voice shaking but sure. We will figure it out together. I cannot come home until I fix this. I will be fine. She tried to make the sentence true by saying it. When she ended the call, her shoulders shook without sound. She tipped her face toward the long, bright edge of sky and breathed the air in slow, measured lines until it stopped hurting to pull in. High above her, separated by glass and climate and salary and the kind of distance that turns people into data, Lawson Reed stood outside the second-floor conference rooms with a phone he had forgotten to answer. He had stepped out to call a board member. He had not expected the city's hum to go quiet enough that one human voice could pierce it. Then he heard her again from the benches below. Please do not stop your medicine. I will make it work. The words threaded themselves through his ribs and refused to be filed under any code. They did not sound like the quick scramble of someone hiding a lie. They sounded like relief and duty and a promise cut from the little she had. He lifted his hand to the glass without thinking and felt the indifferent cold of it. Sunlight caught the curve of her cheek in the parking lot, and he saw a person, not a problem set. Heat pricked one eye, startling and unwelcome. He blinked it back. He imagined telling himself a cleaner story than the one forming inside him, something about accountability and precedent. The better story would not come. His phone vibrated. A calendar reminder. Board call in 5. He stood there anyway, watching the bench until it held only the absence of her. In the reflection, his own face stared back. Hard and polished, a man who had built his life on control and did not know what to do with a feeling that ignored it. He did not go home. The building belonged to other lives after 8. It was quieter then and more honest. Lawson asked security for the lobby footage and watched the scene without sound in conference 3. The sandwich falling, the woman on her knees, his hand lifted like a verdict. He watched the faces behind him and hated them a little, but he hated the stillness in himself more. When the video ended, he closed the laptop as if any sudden motion might break whatever had cracked inside his chest. On the credenza, a framed photograph of his father looked back at him. A man with oil on his hands standing in front of a small hardware store. Work hard, ask for nothing. Keep your head. No one had ever taught him what to do when someone asked for nothing, and you took it anyway. He pressed the intercom. Camille, yes sir. Schedule Derek Shaw for 7, and find a current address for Amara Jones. Also call her if you can reach her. Ask her to come in tomorrow. A small pause at the other end, then the efficient warmth of a human voice. Yes, sir. I will confirm by morning. On the other side of the city, the heat clicked in the walls like a tired metronome. Ruth tucked a blanket around Amara's knees, even as Amara protested she was not cold. Let me be useful, Ruth said, and smiled when Amara did not fight the blanket again. The payroll alert still blinked in a message thread like a joke the day had played on them. They did not speak for a minute. Steam rolled from the kettle and fogged the window, so the streetlight became a blurred coin in the glass. They did not even listen, Amara said finally. They decided first and then spoke as if speaking made the decision clean. Sometimes people who have never begged forget the language, Ruth said. That is not your fault. Amara's phone buzzed. A message from a number she did not know. Camille from the office of the chief executive. Ms. Jones, Mr. Reed would like to speak with you tomorrow. I can arrange a car. I do not need a car, Amara typed, then erased it. What time, she wrote instead. Who is it? Ruth asked, not hiding the concern. The man who fired me. He wants to talk. And what do you want? Ruth said. I want him to hear me, Amara said. For once. Lawson did not sleep. He changed shirts at 3 for no reason, except that the first one smelled faintly of bleach from the conference room, and something about that detail would not leave him. He read Amara's file while the city lit the edges of the sky. 3 years. No write-ups. Overtime that never raised a hand. Night floors, weekend lobbies, that was all. A clean page. At 6:58, a knock came. Come in. Derek Shaw entered, his posture straight with the weight of a decision. You asked to see me. Did you route $30,000 to Ms. Jones? Lawson said. I did. Explain. I received my quarterly bonus on Monday, Derek said. I sent it through finance to Ms. Jones as compensation for extraordinary hours under my department. I did not alter payroll. I did not use company funds. I told her she had earned it. You bypassed me. I did. Why? Because I knew what you would say, Derek replied. She carried 3 jobs worth of work for months. She ate in closets. She took disrespect and answered with quiet excellence. You built a machine that grinds compassion into dust and calls the dust policy. I tried to lodge a pebble in the gear. Lawson looked at him, at the steady eyes of a man who thought rules should serve people and not the reverse. If I punish someone, it will be the person who made the unilateral transfer, not the person who received it. Punish me then, Derek said, but fix what you broke. Lawson pressed the intercom. Camille, confirm Ms. Jones for 10. Hold my morning with the board, and tell security to expect a guest. Yes, sir. At 9:56, the revolving doors sighed again and gave the lobby a small gust of outside air. Amara stepped into the chill with jeans and a cream blouse that refused to apologize for its thrift store seams. No badge, no cart. She held the tote strap to still the tremor in her fingers. The receptionist recognized her and did not know which expression to choose. Camille is expecting me, Amara said. The elevator climbed with the kind of quiet that makes thoughts louder. The mirrored panels returned a woman who had trained herself to be unseen and was learning the opposite in real time. When the doors opened, Lawson stood waiting in the vestibule. Not at his desk, not behind a wall of assistants. Alone. Ms. Jones, he said, thank you for coming. I did not come for pity. I did not ask you to. For a few beats they let the silence stand between them, like a table on which to place plain truths. You were wrong, she said first, because putting the words early mattered. You humiliated me in front of your staff. You chose a story about me because it made sense to you. You could have asked one question. You asked none. I was wrong, he said. I heard a number and built a narrative. I am sorry. The apology sounded new in his mouth, not rehearsed, not smoothed by public relations. She searched his face for the easy arrogance from the hallway and found a smaller, harder thing. Regret or the beginning of it. Why am I here, she asked. Because I watched the footage and because I heard you on the bench after, he said. I do not know how to rewind what I did at 11:17 yesterday. I can start by listening at 10:01 today. I do not need charity, she said. I need courage. Say to the people who watched you fire me that you were wrong. He swallowed pride like a bitter pill. Call a staff meeting, he said. She did not smile. Not yet. But when she followed him toward the glass doors of the conference room, her hands were steady. Somewhere deep inside, a heartbeat settled into a slower, stronger cadence, as if a long-held breath had finally found its way out. The building felt different by a fraction. A hinge loosened, a window cracked. A story that had always belonged to someone else slid across the table toward her and waited to be picked up. Behind them, the elevator chimed. Somewhere 3 floors down, a vacuum cleaner sang its small, constant song. Far beyond the glass, the city kept moving, unconcerned. But in that slice of morning, on that expensive carpet, something had shifted. The man who believed control could solve everything had decided to try a different verb. The woman who had lifted other people's footprints out of marble learned how to leave her own. The glass walls of the conference room reflected 100 wary faces that morning. Assistants hovered at thresholds with pads they would not use. Managers clutched coffee as if warmth could explain the chill underneath. When Lawson stepped in, the murmur fell away one syllable at a time until even the vents felt quiet. He did not take his usual place at the head of the table. He stood near the center as if he had been called to account, which in a way he had. Amara entered 2 steps behind him. No badge, no uniform. She did not try to look taller than she was. She let the room see her as the same woman it had watched kneel the day before, and also not the same at all. Thank you for coming, Lawson said, and the room seemed surprised to hear the words from a man who rarely thanked anyone for breathing on time. I made a decision in this hallway yesterday without asking a single question. I assumed theft where there was none. I humiliated a colleague who has given this company more unseen labor than most of us will admit we rely on. I was wrong, He did not soften the consonants. He did not fold the truth into a phrase that could pass for strategy. He let the sentence hang until its weight settled everywhere it needed to settle. He turned to Amara then, as if the next part could not be spoken to the room without going through her first. If you choose to return, he said, you will not return to the same job. I want you to advise me directly for 1 week on disputes that never make it upstairs until they are already storms. Independent status. Real authority. Not a token seat, but a vote where it matters. If you say no, I will still apologize again. If you say yes, I will listen. Eyes slid toward Amara and away again. Some looked to see whether she would grasp too quickly. Others looked to see whether she would punish them with her acceptance. She did not hurry to answer. She laid her palms against the back of a chair and said only this. I am not here to make anyone comfortable. I am here to make things fair. She did not add that fairness is rarely comfortable. She did not need to. She felt the sentence pass through the glass and the carpet and the fine chairs and lodge somewhere everyone would find later, like a pebble in a shoe. Janet met her outside with a folder and a kindness that made room without crowding. Terms for a week. Independent consultant. Prorated comp equal to the disputed amount. A direct line to a review committee Lawson had never allowed anyone outside the circle to touch. It looked like something that could be real if she made it so. She signed with a steady hand and a heart that would not stop trying to run. The first test came before lunch. Word travels faster than elevators. A maintenance tech sat outside human resources, with arms folded and a jaw set against tears she refused to grant the dignity of lowering. Her name tag read, Alyssa. Night shift, 6 months. Someone had already written a note on a clipboard beside her with a phrase too small for the size of the truth it was trying to hold. Overtime dispute. May I sit? Amara asked. Do you work here? Alyssa said without turning. Sort of. Today. What does that even mean? It means I listen before people get fired. The young woman let out a laugh that was mostly disbelief. Good luck with that. Tell me anyway, Amara said. Start with what you did right. Alyssa's eyes flicked over, surprised by the framing. There was a leak on 9. I got called in on my off night. I came. We worked till 3. I did not clock in because the call came in like a fire drill, and my lead said, move now. We will fix the time later. Today they tell me my hours do not count, and I should watch my tone. Who told you to watch your tone? Hal from facilities. He does the chin thing when he thinks he is being patient. Amara nodded. She knew that chin. She knew his cousins and uncles. Stay here, she said, and breathe like nobody can take air from you. In the small conference room, Hal stood with the defensive posture of a man who believes policy is a shield and a sword in a suit all at once. He started speaking before he finished sitting. She did not clock. We cannot pay what we cannot track. If we pay once, everyone wants the same exception. Why did she not clock? Amara asked without heat. He waved a hand. Emergency call. She forgot. Did you forget to repair the leak because it came in as an emergency call? Amara said. Or did you fix the problem and plan to fix the paperwork after like any reasonable person would when a ceiling is raining? Hal shifted in his seat. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. Is your goal an accurate record or a clever refusal? If you want accuracy, call your lead and verify the hours. If you want refusal, hide behind the system you control and then pretend your hands are tied. Hal's mouth opened and closed. He looked toward the hallway as if an ally might appear and say what he could not. Amara leaned forward. I have mopped your corridor at 2 in the morning. I know the sound the vents make when they are about to fail. I know the smell of a leak before a sensor catches it. I am not asking you to bend rules until they break. I am asking you to stop using them as a wall between you and the people who hold this building up while you sleep. A long breath left him without permission. Fine, he said, and the fight in the word had drained somewhere he could not find. I will approve the hours, but this cannot become a habit. It already was, Amara said softly. You just called it something else. When she stepped back into the hall, Alyssa had her backpack in her lap and her hope half-packed with it. It will hit your check, Amara said, and someone owes you a thank you for coming in when the building needed you. That someone is never going to be Hal, Alyssa said, but the edge had gone out of her voice. She stood and the set of her shoulders shifted just enough to make space inside her chest again. "Thank you," she said, "for sounding like you meant it." "I did," Amara said. She watched the young woman walk away and texted one sentence to her mother. Day 1. Someone gets paid. Ruth responded faster than the elevator. Your voice carries farther than you think. Upstairs, Lawson watched the hallway camera feed because he did not know where else to put his curiosity without breaking it. It could have looked like surveillance. Today it looked like a man learning a language late in life and repeating the words under his breath so he would not forget them. He did not call Amara to say, well done. He did not send flowers like the foolish men in public stories who believe bouquets can fix systems. He sat back and let the small example do what examples do, which is embarrass people who need embarrassing and encourage people who needed one person to go first. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had changed key. Some still rehearsed the easy version of events like a hymn learned as children. She is a symbol. He is going soft. Others said the quieter thing that grows teeth when you speak it out loud. She made it fair. She did not even raise her voice. Fairness, it turns out, makes a different kind of noise. At 3, Janet appeared in Amara's borrowed office with a plastic cup of coffee that was better than whatever the break room machine coughed up. I stole this from the good pot, Janet said in a stage whisper that made Amara like her more. Also, the committee meets at 4 to review language for the inclusion statement. Lawson asked for your notes before that, if you have them. I have them, Amara said, and slid a page across the desk. The page did not try to sound pretty. It tried to sound true. Stop pretending we value everyone equally while our badge access, our reviews, and our schedules disagree. Say we are working toward value that matches our emails. Create a line that does not filter through the people the complaints are about. Give the line a listener with authority and a clock that starts when the complaint arrives, not when it finally breaks into daylight. Make consequences that do not vanish when someone important looks away. Janet read without skimming. You write like someone who has had to memorize rules because the rules never memorized you, she said. I write like someone who is tired of polishing the words that hurt us, Amara said. At 4, the committee room felt like a place where nothing new had ever been welcome. People sat in the chairs the way they always sat in the chairs and cleared their throats in the same places. A lawyer began to speak in a tone that suggested all important sentences have 12 clauses and end in a safe verb. Amara waited for him to finish respecting his training and his breath. Then she spoke. This reads like a poster. It will not protect anyone. If someone like me had used this line last week, I would still have ended up on my knees while the rest of you watched. We need a promise we can break our reputations on if we fail. We need a path that does not require people with the least power to fight uphill while they are still bleeding. Someone shifted. Someone else pretended not to write down the phrasing because they did not want to admit that plain speech could move a room faster than policy prose. Tyler Morgan sat 2 seats down, steady in the way of a person who has already paid a price and decided it was worth it. He caught Amara's eye and nodded once. It said keep going without making the request heavy. After the meeting, Tyler walked with her to the elevator as if hallways had become rivers and everyone needed a companion to cross them. They will resist, he said. They already are, she said. He smiled. Good. Resistance means the screws are turning. Do you ever stop sounding like a person who eats metaphors for lunch? She said, and the laugh that rose surprised her with how easily it came. Only when I am scared, he said. Then I talk like a boring man and hope no one notices my hands. You are scared now, she asked. Of what happens if you leave, he said, and did not offer a joke to soften it. I told Lawson I would give him a week, she said. I did not tell him what happens after that. I am not sure yet. Decide for your sake not to rescue a building, Tyler said. For now I am deciding for my mother, she said. Decision enough for one woman. Evening stretched the shadows of desks into long, thin versions of themselves. The building emptied of its daylight bravado and remembered who cleaned it. Amara took the stairs to the service level because her body remembered the route better than it remembered triumph. Jorge looked up from a cart stocked with supplies and blinked in a way that made his whole face smile. You are back, he said. For a week, she said. And different. He stepped aside from the closet door so she could see the shelves. They were as neat as a prayer. Your row always looked like this, he said. I tried to keep it. You kept more than the shelves, she said. You kept the place honest. He flushed and changed the subject like men do when praise feels like a shirt they do not know how to wear. There is something you should see, he said. He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. A list. Names and phone numbers written in 3 different inks collected over months from the people who never had anyone to call when a shift changed without warning or a supervisor decided discipline meant cruelty. I started asking people if they wanted me to record when things happened, he said. Not because anyone asked me to, because I got tired of hearing the same story start at different times. Can I keep this? She asked. It is yours already, Jorge said. You were the one who told me that keeping track is a kind of power. She slipped the paper into her notebook as if it were a leaf she did not want to crumble. She walked back upstairs and stood in front of the window, where the city pretended to be simple by shrinking itself into squares of light. She called Ruth. Her mother picked up on the second ring. Tell me you ate, Ruth said. I ate something that should not be called coffee and something that used to be a muffin in a different life, Amara said. Also, I may have gotten someone their hours, and I may be teaching lawyers to use human words. So just a quiet day, Ruth said, and Amara could hear the smile. He apologized in front of everyone, Amara said, the words finding a steadier rhythm as she spoke them. It did not make the ground simple, but it moved it. He offered a week. I took it. What do you need from me? Ruth asked. To remind me that 1 week is not a miracle and not a trap. Just time I can turn into something if I push. You have always turned not much into something, Ruth said. You learned that cooking rice on too low a flame and making it taste like Sunday. Do not forget that is also a kind of leadership, even if they will try to call it something less. After the call, Amara returned to the committee notes and rewrote 2 paragraphs so they stopped sounding like a wall and started sounding like a door. She marked the page for the line that would need a fight tomorrow. She knew it already. A direct report path that skipped the layer that so often did the harm. It would feel like a threat to people who had mistaken being in the middle for being important. At 9, Lawson knocked once, and then seemed to remember that knocking is what one does when entering other people's rooms. Can I come in? He said. You already did, she said. Sit. He sat without ceremony. For a man who had spent years being theatrical without meaning to, it was a good sign. I owe you an update, he said. Finance is rewriting the timekeeping guidance for emergency calls. Compliance is adjusting the language on progressive discipline to remove the parts we added years ago that translate into make the person small and then fault them for being small. He paused as if listening to himself from far away. That sounds obvious when I say it. It did not sound obvious to me until today. Obvious is the word the powerful used to describe truths the powerless had to memorize years earlier, Amara said. You will hate how often you have to relearn this. He did not defend himself. He set a small folder on her desk instead. I do not want to bury this, he said. Director Bell has filed a request for an inquiry into Mr. Morgan's transfer of his bonus. I will not allow the review until we write rules that make compassion possible instead of punishable. I am telling you now so you do not hear it later in a way that makes you doubt I meant what I said this morning. She studied him. This morning he had looked like a man holding a confession with tongs. Tonight he looked like a man who had discovered his own hands were allowed to carry weight without dropping it. Good, she said, because the people who watch me kneel will not be healed by a sentence. They will be healed by a pattern. Build me one, he said. Then he stood and left without another word, as if trusting her to fill in the part he could not write himself. She stayed late. She read the list Jorge had given her until the names felt like a map of the building's conscience. She wrote a short policy note that started with the word when instead of if, because harm was not theoretical. She drafted a message for a line that did not exist yet. It opened with 3 sentences that did not ask for a certain tone or a certain level of education or a certain way of being small enough to fit. Tell us what happened. We will write down every word. We will start a clock. By the time she locked the office, the night had pulled the city into its quieter version of itself. The lobby smelled like lemon and faintly like the sharp tail of a winter evening. The security guard at the desk nodded toward the doors and then toward her in a way that said more than good night. He had seen the footage too. He had seen the morning. His nod said, "I saw you before that and after too." On the sidewalk, she could have turned right toward the bus stop out of habit. She turned left instead and walked 3 blocks before the air thinned the day out of her thoughts. She passed the diner where she sometimes counted change twice before ordering fries and coffee. She did not go in. She did not need salt and caffeine to bless this small victory into something bigger. She let the sound of a far train do the work. When she reached home, Ruth had left the chain off. The apartment smelled like soap and onion, and something sweet from another neighbor's kitchen. Ruth looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with time and everything to do with relief. "Tell me the shortest version, and then tell me the long one if you have the breath," Ruth said. "Shortest version," Amara said. "He said he was wrong. I said he had to say it where it mattered. I got a week to make a crack into a door. I fixed one paycheck. I argued with one man who thinks rules are armor. I wrote down a way to make listening a job and not a favor." Ruth leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. "The long version can wait." "Eat something." Amara ate without tasting and then tasted without needing the food. The way you do after a day where your body spent itself and your spirit decided to build anyway. Later in bed, she did not replay the humiliation in the corridor. She replayed Alyssa's shoulders when they unknotted. She replayed Lawson choosing a sentence that might cost him with the people who liked him safest. She replayed Jorge sliding a crumpled list across a hallway like a baton. Sleep came with a nervous kind of peace, the kind that knows tomorrow will ask for more and trusts that asking is not a theft. Morning would bring new faces and new names and someone, somewhere who had learned to survive by never asking and who might try anyway, because they had heard a rumor that the building had grown another ear. Morning would bring resistance shaped like professionalism and sabotage shaped like delay. Morning would bring the chance to prove that fairness can be as relentless as harm when someone chooses to make it so. Before sleep took her, Amara set her alarm and her intention. 1 week is not long, but a week is a door if you stop demanding it be a wall. The building woke up wary. You could feel it in the way conversations clipped themselves short when footsteps approached, and in the way elevator doors seemed to hesitate as if not wanting to commit. By 9, the executive floor was a hush of coffee lids and careful eyes. The meeting invite had gone out with a subject line so restrained it felt like a dare. Final review of inclusion statement and process changes. Attendance required. Amara arrived 1 minute early and stood just inside the doorway, long enough to measure the temperature of the room. The table was full of people who had learned to perform listening while waiting for their turn to speak. On the side wall, a screen cast the draft statement in neat lines that looked like a certificate more than a promise. Tyler sat 3 chairs down, posture steady, a quiet hinge in a door that wanted to slam. Lawson had not yet taken his seat. At the far end, a woman with precise hair and a watch that looked like it kept time for other watches arranged a folder with slow intention. Sandra Bell, acting on behalf of compliance, while the board decided whether to elevate her after years of being the power behind the policy. When Lawson entered, he surprised the table by not going to the head. He chose a chair in the middle as if proximity could undo hierarchy. The surprise crackled through the room and then tried to disguise itself as professionalism. "Thank you for being here," Lawson said without preamble. "We have language to finish and habits to unlearn. Ms. Bell, I understand you asked to raise a procedural matter. Do it now so we can do the real work after." Sandra smiled in a way that showed no teeth. "Thank you. Before we finalize any language that alters reporting structure, we must address a serious policy breach. Last week, Director Morgan routed personal funds through payroll to an hourly employee and labeled those funds as compensation. Regardless of intent, this created a false record and exposed the company to risk. I am requesting an immediate formal review and a temporary suspension pending investigation." Tyler did not look down. He did not look at Amara. He looked at Lawson as if to say, "Decide who you are in front of witnesses." The room leaned toward the answer, like crops toward light. Lawson folded his hands. Director Morgan took his bonus and used proper finance channels to help a member of his team. He believed the system was failing. No company funds were misused. No laws were broken. He demonstrated compassion. If our policies make compassion a breach, our policies are wrong. There will be no suspension. There will be a policy rewrite, A murmur traveled around the table like electricity finding ground. Sandra kept her smile and sharpened it. Then you are choosing to ignore compliance for optics. I am choosing to correct a structure that encourages cowardice and calls it neutrality, Lawson said. And I am doing it in daylight. He turned to Amara, and the room followed his eyes before they could stop themselves. Ms. Jones, you have notes on the draft. Begin with what would matter if you were reading this after being told to watch your tone. Amara did not clear her throat. She did not apologize for speaking. The first paragraph pretends we already value everyone equally. We do not. We value convenience, familiarity, speed. Say the true thing, or the rest reads like a poster. The reporting line routes complaints through the managers who are often the problem. Create a direct path that bypasses that layer and starts a clock the moment someone speaks, not the moment we finally let their words count. Publish aggregate numbers quarterly. If we are proud of our culture, we should be able to look at it. A lawyer at the end of the table adjusted his glasses. Publishing numbers exposes us. Keeping them hidden is how you treat harm like weather, she said. Measurable is not the same as inevitable. Sandra's pen made an audible point against paper. And what gives you the authority to redefine how this company measures itself, Ms. Jones? The same thing that gives anyone the authority to tell the truth, Amara said. Living with the consequences of your decisions without being asked to sign them. Lawson let the silence sit long enough to register and then filled it with an action rather than a remark. Effective today, Ms. Jones will have full voting rights on the review committee and will co-chair the new ethics and inclusion panel with Director Morgan. If we are going to listen, we should listen where decisions get made, not in break rooms after the fact. Someone sucked a breath between teeth. Someone else looked pleased against their will. Sandra sat a little straighter and set her pen down as if to keep her hand from saying something it would not be able to walk back. The rest of the meeting had to be lived through. Language was hammered into sentences that would still need human hands to matter. The direct line took shape as a number and a mailbox and a rotating team of listeners with authority. The clock rule was agreed to in principle and contested in practice, and then forced forward by the fact of Amara's gaze on the room, which made delay feel like cowardice instead of caution. When the doors opened and the room spilled back into corridors, the building did what buildings do. It carried the hour like a scent. People who had never met Amara knew they would be using a line that did not exist yesterday. People who had tried not to watch the hallway humiliation 2 days earlier now replayed a different scene, not of blame, but of a door opening a crack and being held. By noon, Janet appeared at Amara's office with an expression that suggested both good news and a dare. The town hall is at 2, she said. Lawson would like you to speak if you are willing. About what? Amara said. About what you can say that he cannot, Janet answered, and left the rest to courage. The auditorium filled in a way that did not look like mandate. Security staff in the back with their arms not crossed. Engineers with pens they would not use. Cooks with their aprons still on. Finance associates who had learned to look bored at speeches because boredom is safer than hope. Lawson spoke first and briefly, which was in itself a surprise. Then he stepped aside, and the light found Amara. She stood with both feet planted as if the stage were a floor she had already mopped and owned. My name is Amara Jones, she began. 3 years ago, I started here before sunrise and left after most of you had changed back into the people you are at home. Last week, I was fired in a hallway because someone heard a number and decided it meant I had done something I did not do. I will not perform my pain for you. I will tell you what matters. The way we decide whose voice counts is not an accident. It is a system. We can design a better one. She told them about the line and the clock and the promise to publish. She told them that fairness sounds like boring logistics until your life depends on the boring part. She did not ask for applause. She asked for stories. If you have one, bring it to us. If you do not, listen to those who do and resist the urge to translate their words into something easier for you to understand. When she stepped back, not everyone stood. Enough did that the sound felt like a room remembering what its legs were for. The afternoon cut itself into tasks. A draft circulated with red marks that looked less like bleeding and more like movement. 2 supervisors wrote to ask for training on how not to be the person their teams bypassed. One executive replied with a long paragraph about risk that read like a polite refusal to grow. Lawson forwarded it to Amara with a single line. "Help me answer this without sounding like me." She typed back a response that did not flatter or scold. "You are afraid that transparency will make us vulnerable. It will. It will also make us honest. Honesty is a defense you do not have to remember to carry. Say that, then mean it." At 6, when the floor began to empty of the people who leave at 6, Amara took the elevator down to the service level again. The concrete hallway smelled like lemon and old air. She knocked on the door of the janitorial closet out of habit and because the ritual of asking matters even when you have keys. Jorge opened with a grin that crumpled one cheek. He had a stack of small cards in his hand. "What are those?" she asked. "Feedback cards," he said, suddenly shy. "If the fancy floors can have them, so can we. I asked folks to write what they would fix first if they were in charge." He handed her the stack. The top card said, "Fix the service elevator so my knees stop paying for your timelines." Another said, "Stop scheduling us like we do not have children." A third said, "Let us swap shifts without pretending it is a crime." She held the little pile like a treasure that did not sparkle. "We are going to use these," she said. "Who is we?" he asked. "You and me and anyone who decides that listening is their job," she said. On her way out, she passed the break room where a poster had been taped to the bulletin board overnight. Values, innovation, integrity, impact. Someone had drawn a small arrow in pen and written in the white space dignity. She did not know who had done it. She did not need to. The building was beginning to annotate itself. That night at home, Ruth sat with her feet up and her eyes closed while the news murmured about markets and weather and a fire somewhere else. "Tell me the part you are afraid to tell me," Ruth said without opening her eyes. Amara leaned against the kitchen counter and pressed a cold glass to her wrist. "I am afraid they will make me a symbol and then starve the work. I am afraid I will become a story they tell to avoid telling the truth about themselves. I am afraid I will fail people who deserve better." Ruth opened her eyes then and turned her head. "Symbols are shortcuts people use when they are tired. Let them be tired. You are not a shortcut. You are a road. Walk it. And if they stop walking with you, keep going until you find the ones who will." Sleep came later, thinner. Sometime before dawn, a message arrived from a number with no name. "Thank you for saying out loud what the rest of us have been whispering into our uniforms. I did not want to vanish without anyone noticing. You made me feel like I will not." Morning began with a small thing that felt like a herald. A supervisor from shipping sent a photo of a repaired service elevator with a note that said, "Consider this my apology to every pair of knees we ignored. Not everything would be this simple. Some changes would grind, some would kick. But a machine had moved one tooth's width, and you could hear the difference if you pressed your ear to the day." In the afternoon, a message from compliance landed in Lawson's inbox, and then in Amara's. "Request to initiate formal inquiry into Director Morgan's actions persists." Attached was a memo dressed in neutral words that smelled like strategy. Lawson replied with a sentence that surprised even him. "Declined pending revision of policy to incorporate compassion as a protected managerial discretion when harm prevention is the aim." He added a second line. "If we cannot defend that sentence to ourselves, we do not deserve to ask anyone to work here." Amara stared at the screen and felt something unfamiliar and necessary. Not praise. Relief at seeing power do something other than protect itself. By the end of the week, the inclusion statement existed as more than a document. The line answered at odd hours and did not ask anyone to explain their tone before their truth. The clock started when it should. A report draft began to take the shape of numbers no one had wanted to see. All of it fragile, all of it real. But buildings remember their old songs. Resistance organized itself into questions that sounded responsible and delays that looked like due diligence. Emails took a beat longer to arrive. Calendar invites disappeared into folders. A whisper about Amara turned up in a hallway she no longer cleaned. "She is dangerous," someone said. "She is making it about herself. She is making it about people," someone else answered. And the room did not know how to process that. On Friday morning, an envelope slid under Amara's office door while she was in a meeting. No return address. Inside a typed note. "Justice is subjective. You are dividing us. Step back before you break what is working. She read it once and then again, and then slid it into a drawer with other small artifacts of a job that asked you to carry what it could not admit it had dropped. In the afternoon, Lawson stopped by without an appointment. He held a thin folder like it might burn through his palm. "We found something in the archives," he said. The words had the careful weight of a man who knew that what he was about to say would move everything again, and not in a way he could choreograph. Maintenance uncovered a set of files in a vent shaft downstairs. Names, codes, recommendations. "It looks like a list of people someone decided were cheaper to lose. It looks like a pattern." Amara felt the air change shape around her. "Let me see," she said. He handed her the folder. She opened it and saw columns that pretended to be neutral and were not. Role, tenure, age, race, retention value. A final column with phrases that felt like a mirror held up to a shadow. Emotional, culture risk, unstable. The dates spanned years. The signatures at the bottom told a story that had been hiding in plain, bureaucratic sight. "This is not a policy," she said. "This is a weapon." "We will need to verify," Lawson said. "We will need to prepare for what happens when we make this public. We will need to remember that before this is public, it was private in the lives it already broke," she said. He closed his eyes for one beat and then opened them to the work. "Do you want to lead the audit?" he asked. "No," she said. "I want to lead the truth. The audit can serve that, but the truth has to answer to people, not to our fear." He nodded as if accepting a sentence that would cost him a board seat somewhere in a possible future he had once believed mattered. "Then let us begin," he said. They did not know that by Monday a screenshot of an internal directive would be on a reporter's screen, and that the building would fill with cameras and signs and people who had waited years for a door to crack open this much. They did not know how quickly the old guard would sharpen its knives or how the new guard would discover it had hands. They knew only that the folder in Amara's lap was heavier than paper, and that the floor beneath them had started to tilt toward an accounting that would not be contained by a memo. Amara closed the folder and held it to her chest the way people hold something that can both cut and heal. She thought of Alyssa's shoulders unclenching. She thought of Jorge's list. She thought of Ruth tying a blanket around knees that had no business being anyone's foundation, and doing it anyway because what else was there? She met Lawson's eyes and saw not a savior and not a villain, but a man standing in the doorway of his own making, deciding which way to lean. "Bring me the names," she said. "All of them. We are going to say them out loud." The first name she spoke aloud belonged to a woman whose badge had been turned in 2 winters ago. Elena Rios, 64, cafeteria, 10 years of service. Terminated with a phrase that looked tidy and smelled like rot. Role consolidation. The folder listed her as low retention value. The column for justification said culture risk. The note in the margin was a single word: quiet. The irony made Amara's teeth ache. She marked the page and moved to the next. Carlton Hayes, maintenance, 20 years. Replaced by a hire 2 decades younger at a higher wage with benefits Carlton had been denied because of a reclassification that coincided with his birthday. The justification column said unstable schedule. The schedule had been unstable because his lead kept moving his start time 15 minutes at a clip, so he would miss the threshold for overtime. The list kept going, a ledger of decisions wrapped in language so bland it felt like a dare. By mid-morning, Amara had a whiteboard filled with names and arrows and years, a map of harm that looked like an architect's drawing for a building none of them would ever want to enter. Tyler stood beside her with a stack of printouts and a face that had seen what looking away costs. Lawson hovered near the door as if trying to be present without taking up space. Janet came and went with coffee and tissues and the kind of competence that appears soft because it does not explain itself. "We need a process," Tyler said, and he meant it, and he also knew the poverty of the word in the face of what they were holding. "We need to contact them," Amara said. "Not with a lawyer, with a person. We ask permission to record their stories. We ask what they want, not what we think they should want. We do not pretend money replaces years. We do not promise what we cannot deliver. We promise we will not forget their names again." Lawson watched her speak and felt the urge to turn the sentence into a plan with bullet points and dates. He resisted. He was learning. Not quickly enough. but learning. He offered what he could offer without making it about control. I will fund whatever this takes. I will stand in front of what comes back. You will stand beside, she said, not in front. Not behind. Beside. Beside, he repeated, and the word landed on him like a garment he had never noticed he lacked. They built a team that did not look like every other team the company had announced in breathy emails. A former receptionist who knew everyone's middle name. A warehouse floor lead who had survived 2 restructurings and kept a notebook as if it were a raft. A temp from accounting who could smell a bad number the way a baker can smell yeast dying. Jorge from janitorial with his stack of feedback cards and a memory for who cried quietly and who did not cry at all. They called it an audit because that is what people who like to name things would recognize. But internally it was a reckoning. The calls began. Some went to voicemail boxes that had been full for months. Some rang into silence because the number belonged to a phone that had been pawned. Some were answered in voices that sounded like mistrust wrapped in exhaustion. A few were answered by laughter that had no humor in it. "You're calling from Reed Dynamics," a woman named Alicia said. "The company that taught me to double-check the locks on my mouth. Why now? Because someone found a file that should have been burned, and because not burning files is the only good thing the people who hurt you did," Amara said. "Because your name is in it. Because your life is not a line in someone else's performance review." Alicia let out a slow breath. "You are not what I expected to hear," she said. "Come by my place Saturday. We will see whether you know how to listen when no one is watching." They went. They sat on couches that had been bought used and repaired twice. They drank coffee that had been brewed too strong on purpose, because hospitality is not a budget line. It is a way of holding dignity open. They heard stories they could not fit into a spreadsheet without committing a fresh harm. A man named Terrell who had trained 3 supervisors and been asked to sign a voluntary separation letter so the numbers would look cleaner. A woman named Fatima who had been shifted between departments just before she would have qualified for health coverage and told to be grateful she still had hours. A janitor named Rosa who had been written up for insubordination because she paused to rest her back on a stair landing after mopping 5 flights in a row and then let go for accumulated incidents. Back at the office, the whiteboard grew crowded. Janet ordered another on a rolling stand and then another. Tyler built a timeline that showed how policy words had thickened into practices that took on a life of their own. Lawson drafted a memo to the board that did not hide behind passive constructions. "We did this," it said, "under my leadership." He wrote the sentence and felt his hands sweat in a way that reminded him of his first investor meeting. He did not delete the sentence. In the second week, an email leaked. It was not surprising, and still it felt like a betrayal because the work was not ready to be reduced to a headline. Carter Tech equivalent names replaced by Reed Dynamics in the gossip chain. A reporter at a regional paper asking for comment on allegations of discriminatory termination practices based on an internal file. The call came to Lawson's assistant first, and then to Lawson. He looked at the screen. He could have ignored it and prepared a statement. He answered. "We are investigating," he said. "We are not bearing it. We will make our findings public whether they exonerate us or not." He heard himself and felt another layer of old training flake off. The story ran anyway. It would have been kind to say it was balanced. It was less kind than that. The headline used the word accused because headlines like that word. The photo was of the building's front glass because glass looks like transparency even when it is a wall. The second paragraph mentioned Amara by name. Not as a thief and not as a martyr, but as a person who had become a problem for people who like their problems to go away when the quarter ended. Her face traveled farther than she had ever gone. The lobby filled the next morning with people who do not read press releases but feel them in the air. Some carried signs that said, "Remember our names." Some carried phones. Some carried their lunch because you do not stop living while you protest. Security stood in their places with a stiffness that tried to be neutral. Inside, the elevators opened and closed and brought up executives with faces set to a professional shade of worry. "They are going to demand you resign," Tyler said in the doorway of Amara's office, because his job was not to be optimistic, but to be honest. "Then we will see whether they mean the apology or just the optics," Amara said. She had slept like a person who expects to be woken by a knock and had not been, which was its own kind of warning. The letter came early in the afternoon. From the board. formal language about trust and stability and fiduciary duty. A request for her to step aside pending review so that the company could conduct its investigation without distraction. She read it once and passed it to Lawson. He read it and looked up at her with eyes that did not ask her to make it easy for him. "If you stay," he said, "they will say I am weak. If I go," she said, "they will be right about what kind of company this is." He nodded and picked up a pen. He wrote 2 sentences that would guarantee a fight he would have to win in a room she would not be allowed into. "I reject the request. Ms. Jones will continue to lead the ethics effort. If this is a test of whether we mean what we have said in the last 2 weeks, we should be grateful for the clarity." The tribunal was scheduled for Thursday. Closed door. No press. No lawyers. 12 board members with biographies that read like the inside of an airport bookstore. Lawson would be present, but not voting, because the rules said something about conflict of interest when the conflict was finally between a person and a system. Amara prepared not with a binder, but with a list of names she would not let them turn into numbers again. She printed 3 documents and put them in a folder. The file, a signed note from a board member authorizing a pilot of the retention model years earlier, with language about cost efficiency and perceived risk that would look uglier on camera than it did on letterhead. A copy of Elena Rios's death certificate, obtained through public means and placed in the folder like a photograph at a memorial. In the small room where they asked her to wait, she could hear voices through the wall, the way you can hear a conversation through an apartment vent. Words like destabilizing influence and public confidence and narrative control. She breathed in for 4 and out for 8 until the numbers were just a way to get through a minute without breaking it. They called her in. The semicircle of faces arranged themselves like a mural of authority. Gloria Weiss, chairing, spoke first without looking at the papers in front of her, as if familiarity with your notes is a weakness. "We are here to determine whether your continued presence is in the best interest of the company." Amara set the folder on the table without opening it. "I am here to determine whether the company has any interest left worth protecting," she said. She did not raise her voice. She did not smile. They asked their questions the way people ask questions when the answer they want is the one they already wrote into their minutes. "Did you contact the press?" "No." "Did you coordinate protests?" "No." "Did you undermine the chain of command?" "I refuse to let it be used to silence people who were harmed by it." "Did you act with bias?" "Toward the truth, yes." "Did you consider the impact on shareholder value?" "I considered the impact on people's lives. If your value equation cannot hold that, your math is wrong." She let them finish the performance and then asked for time. They granted it because not granting it would look like fear. She opened the folder and laid the 3 documents on the table. The file, the authorization note, the death certificate. She spoke each name slowly. She did not add adjectives. She did not need to. The names did the work words cannot do when they are busy trying to be safe. When she finished, she stepped back. "I was hired to clean what you did not want to see," she said. "I am still doing that. If the truth makes you unstable, it is not my stability you should be questioning." They sent her out. In the room next door, she sat again and did not pick up her phone because she did not want to give the waiting to anything that could not hold it. Lawson came in after 37 minutes with a face that looked like a man who had carried something heavy across a field and was not sure his arms would be quiet again for a while. "They voted," he said. 6-5. You stay." She exhaled a breath that felt older than the morning. He handed her a letter. It used formal words to say what the room had decided and a single line at the end to say something else. "Effective immediately, Miss Jones is appointed Chief Integrity Officer, reporting directly to the Chief Executive." The title sounded absurd in her mouth and sacred in the mouths of people who had wanted someone like her in a room like that for decades. "There is a condition," Lawson said. "We make a public apology, not staged, not parsed to death. You will speak for what we are doing next. They will accuse me of hiding behind you. I will ignore them." "I will not carry your absolution," she said. "I am not asking you to," he said. "I am asking you to carry a plan." The press conference looked like every press conference and did not feel like any. Cameras, lights, a podium. Words that would travel into the rooms of people who had never stepped inside the building and would still know whether they believed them. Lawson spoke first because that was still his job. He did not list initiatives. He said we were wrong and then said we are going to do this. This was not a bullet list. It was a project with a name that made Amara's throat tighten. The Elena Project, an internal watchdog with independent hiring, a reporting line that could not be buried, public metrics, and an external audit partner with a reputation for not caring whose name is on the lobby. When it was her turn, Amara did not thank anyone for the opportunity. She said, "My name is Amara Jones, and I used to clean your floors." She held up the file and said, "This is what we did." She set it down and said, "This is what we are going to do." She did not look at the cameras. She looked at the back row where a woman in a cafeteria apron stood next to a man in a security uniform and a young person in a hoodie with a visitor sticker. She spoke as if they were the only people in the room who mattered, because in the end they were. After the lights went down, the work got heavier and truer. Resistance did not dissolve just because a microphone had been kind. Some people resigned with statements that sounded like dignity and smelled like retreat. Some doubled down on the old ways and discovered that the floor they were standing on had shifted a degree and would no longer hold them the way it had. Lawsuits were threatened. Letters were drafted. An anonymous note slid under Amara's door that said, "Watch your back," with a blocky hand that wanted to feel dangerous. She threw it away and kept walking. The calls continued. The whiteboards filled. The report took shape as a document that did not pretend to be neutral about the value of a human life. The line rang in the middle of the night and someone answered. The service elevator worked. The overtime policy for emergency calls became a page someone could point to instead of a favor someone could withhold. Alyssa sent a photo of a check that was not missing 2 hours. She added 3 words that did more than any headline. It counted this time. One evening near the end of the second month, after a day of meetings that had eaten more hope than most days, Amara walked through the lobby toward the street and saw a man with a mop step back as if she were an executive who should not be asked to squeeze past. She stopped and took the mop from his hand and ran it once along the marble. "You are not in the way," she said, and handed it back. He smiled in a way that carried years and said, "Thank you for seeing me." She wanted to say, "I always did." She said, "Only because you were here to be seen." The season turned without asking permission. The air shifted from sharp to something that approached kind. The headlines did what headlines do. They moved on. The work did not. That was the point. The Elena Project grew into a floor with desks and a whiteboard wall that looked like a storm had left writing instead of wreckage. The team added a second intern who had the cautious brilliance of a person who learned early that noticing is a survival skill. A door plaque went up because even the humble need a sign sometimes. Office of Integrity and Inclusion. Inside, a corkboard held names written in different hands on index cards. No voice too small, someone had printed on a strip of paper taped across the top. No name forgotten. On a Tuesday morning that smelled like rain that would never arrive, Amara stood at the edge of the open room and watched the work move through people like current through wires. Luis negotiating a schedule accommodation for a single father without turning it into a tale about sacrifice. Janet coaching a manager through the art of apologizing without staking a claim on the other person's graciousness. Tyler drafting a policy that started with the word when and used the word must without blushing. Lawson stopping by in a flannel and jeans on his way to the warehouse. Not to be seen but to see, which is a different verb. "You look like you own something," Ruth said that night over the phone when Amara described the day. "I own a promise I have to keep," Amara said. "You always have," Ruth said. "It is just that now other people have to sign it too." The first Community Reconciliation Day arrived on a Friday that tried to be sunny and almost made it. No press, no speeches. A set of tables in the courtyard under a banner that said, "We will listen." Not an event, a practice. Current employees and former ones. People who had been hurt and people who had been complicit and people who were both because most of us are. There were cookies someone's aunt had made and a cooler of water and a stack of small cards that asked a single question. What do you need from us that we have not given? People wrote, people sat, people cried in the brittle way middle-aged men do when they have not been given any place to put their sorrow that did not feel like failure. A guard apologized to a cook he had once written up because she was 10 minutes late after a bus broke down. A finance analyst listened to a janitor describe the geometry of her morning and understood for the first time that 10 minutes is sometimes a mountain. At the edge of the crowd, a young woman with long braids and anxious fingers approached Amara with an envelope. "Are you Miss Jones?" she asked. "My sister worked here. She used to talk about you. She passed last year. She said to find you if I ever needed to remember that someone saw her." "What was her name?" Amara asked, though she had a feeling she knew before the answer came. "Clarice," the woman said. "Inside is a photo she wanted you to have. It is old, but it is the one where she looks like herself." Amara opened the envelope and saw a woman with 2 children and a smile that did not apologize for loving them. On the back, in careful handwriting, were words that lifted and landed like prayer. "Tell Amara she gave me time. Tell her time is the thing no one ever gave me before." "Thank you," Amara said. "Not for the picture, for the trust. I just wanted to make sure she is on your wall," the young woman said. "She already was," Amara said. "Now everyone else will know it." In the months that followed, the office learned to weather cycles of attention without letting them dictate its pace. Requests for interviews came and were ignored or accepted, depending on whether they served the work. A documentary crew tried to angle for access and was told that scars are not for spectacle. A trade journal wrote a surprisingly generous piece about how building policy around dignity produces better retention than fear, and the comments filled with people who needed permission to say they had known this all along. The board shifted. 2 members retired into language that sounded gracious and was also strategic. One was asked to step down after an independent review traced the architecture of the retention model back to a committee he had chaired. Lawson survived a vote he would have lost a year earlier by standing up in a room that had grown tired of its own reflection and saying out loud that he would rather shutter the company than continue to run it on a lie. People can smell when a man means something. He meant it. They blinked and voted to keep him, but not the him he had been. The new him, the besider, as Janet had started teasing in private when he was not around. There were still losses. A woman who had been illegally terminated 3 years earlier died before the settlement check arrived. Her daughter picked it up and asked if she could donate part of it to the office that had made the apology feel like more than a wire transfer. Amara said yes and also no. Yes to the gift. No to the idea that a debt could be settled in currency alone. "We will also pay in attention," she said. "We will also pay in the work of changing the thing that broke your mother." The daughter nodded. "I will take that kind of money too," she said. One morning, walking the floor with a cup of coffee that had finally been upgraded from the bitter sludge of early days, Amara stopped at the bulletin board where announcements lived and died. Someone had posted a poem in a messy hand. It began with a line she did not recognize and ended with one she would remember. "We are the ones who keep the lights honest." Later, she would learn it was Luis who had written it on his lunch break after fixing a schedule that refused to acknowledge a school drop-off. He pretended to be embarrassed and then pretended less the longer people thanked him. A year mark approached. Amara did not notice until Janet pointed at the calendar and said, "You need to plan for the town hall." She resisted the idea of anniversaries because they have a way of flattening every day in between into a montage. Still, rituals matter. She wrote notes on a scrap of paper and lost them and wrote them again. She told herself she would keep it short and then accepted that brevity and honesty do not always fit in the same sentence. On the day of the town hall, the auditorium filled with a different kind of quiet. Not skepticism, not even anticipation, attention. Lawson introduced her with fewer words than usual, and one that mattered. "My colleague." She walked to the podium with the feeling you get when a room is not a threat but a charge. "I was never supposed to be on this stage," she said. "I was supposed to make it shine for whoever was." Then a thing happened. "I saw you. You saw me. We did not always like what we saw. We decided to look anyway." She talked about the numbers without letting them become the point. She talked about stories without letting them become a commodity. She talked about policy the way you talk about the best kind of shelter. Not glamorous, necessary. She ended with a sentence that came to her on the walk to work that morning when a bus knelt to take on a passenger with a cane. "Justice does not roar," she said. "It returns, again and again, until we build a place where it can rest." The applause felt less like victory than like a room promising to keep working. She preferred it that way. Later in the office, with the whiteboard walls and the corkboard of names, She pinned the photo of Clarice beside a small yellowed card that had been rescued from the mailroom months earlier. A thank you note from Elena that had never been delivered. "Thank you for treating me like I mattered even when others did not," it said in looping script. Amara touched the corner with 2 fingers like a secular benediction. On her walk home, she took the long way, past the bus stop where she had once sat with a paper bag of folded uniform and felt the world narrowing. The bench was just a bench now. That felt right. At the corner, a kid on a scooter almost ran into her and skidded to a stop with a perfect apology. She laughed and waved him on. A block later, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, simple as a glass of water. "I start back on Monday. You do not know me. You made it possible. I will not waste it." She stopped and leaned against a wall warm from a day of sun that had finally committed to arriving. She wrote back without asking for details that belonged to someone else. "I am glad you are coming home." Then she slipped the phone into her pocket and kept walking with the kind of tired that means you have done the thing you were supposed to do that day. At home, Ruth had left a pot of something on the stove that tasted like memory, improved by practice. They ate quietly. At the window, the city did its evening trick of turning the ordinary into lit rectangles. Ruth set her fork down and said the line she saved for the days when she wanted to be sure she was saying the right one. "You did good, baby. Not perfect." "Good. Good is the word I trust," Amara said. "It is the one that got us here." Before bed, she stood in front of the small mirror and pinched the bridge of her nose the way she does when a long day has left fingerprints on her face. She thought of Lawson's hand against the glass that first evening, and how far both of them had traveled from whatever that version of themselves thought power was for. She thought of Tyler's steadying nods, and Janet's stolen cups of good coffee, and Jorge's cards, and Alyssa's check, and Luis's poem, and the guard's quiet nods. She thought of all the names on the corkboard and all the ones they had not found yet. She thought of the folder in her desk that she still opens sometimes, not to punish herself but to keep her aim clean. She turned off the light and lay down and slept the sleep of a person who knows the morning will ask for more and is ready to give it. Not because she is a symbol, not because she is a saint, but because she is a citizen of a place she is helping to build. A place where a line rings and someone answers. A place where a clock starts and does not stop until the truth is accounted for. A place where justice does not have to roar because it is finally allowed to live. In the dream she had before dawn, the building was the same building and also not the same at all. The marble floors shone, not because someone had scrubbed away the scuffs of the people who kept it alive, but because the light found them and called them beautiful. She woke with the taste of that image in her mouth, like the first bite of something you have been cooking for years, finally seasoned the way you always meant it to be.